Jacob. When Jacob as soon as he sits down, oh good, he's down. Hey, listen, thank you so much for being here today. Please know this, your voice matters. And so we are thrilled that you're here today and you're participating. Before we get started, I would like to recognize Mr. Chance Bonaventura, who's representing Mayor Pro Tem Fiore's office, so thank you for being here, and thank her for her support. Today you're going to see a draft future plan, our mobility plan called On Board. I want to go ahead and bring Craig Rayborn. He's our Director of Metropolitan Planning, who, along with his team, have worked closely with all of the local jurisdictions and the community to develop the plan that we have here today. So Craig's going to tell you more about the plan.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to see if I can get this, well. Okay. I know they're both on, so we'll go for stereo effect perhaps, or I don't want to bend over too much, so I'm going to, great, okay. All right, so thanks everyone. I just want to echo MJ's comments about how important the engagement, the input that we've received from members of the community has been for the development of Onboard. I want to welcome everyone as well, and really excited for the chance to run through and describe the plan and how we got here, and what the next steps are going to be. So as we've talked about, community engagement has been a really, really important part of the development of the Onboard plan. So as you can see, we've had across literally hundreds of events, more than 100 speaking engagements, a number of surveys. We've had contact with more than 80,000 people providing input into what their needs and interests are for the region's future mobility. It's been a very important part of how we've approached this plan. We really want to make sure that the plan reflects what we've heard from the community, from the region, as well as what the data and needs and all the analysis supports and shows. So the region is obviously growing. You can see these are developments that are just planned for the very near immediate future. These kinds of developments, so you can see Allegiant Stadium opening in a few months, the Convention Center redevelopment, Resorts World opening soon, Circa as well. You know, about $8 billion of investment happening. All of that leads to more population growth and more visitors. So right now, 2019, visitors are about 42 million, and population's about 2.2 million. Over the next 20 years, that's going to grow. 50 million visitors, and then population will grow to 2.8-ish, maybe 3 million people. It grows fast here. Nevada's been the fastest growing state in the last few years of the census, and Southern Nevada's been one of the fastest growing regions. So all of these put a stress on our transportation system. You can probably guess where this is. Luckily, it's not Las Vegas. Yes, it's Los Angeles. And it really highlights how what we want to try to avoid. And it also highlights that one mode can't do it all, or you end up with this kind of a situation. And so what we've really looked at with this plan is a broad mobility solution that includes more than just roads. Now, all that growth, like I said, it puts a lot of stress on the transportation system, and planning for that, looking 20 years out, how do we fix that for the long run? And that's what Onboard is intended to start to address. It's fascinating. I'm going to go ahead and click past it. It stays about the same. So the Onboard plan was intended to address 4 main elements. So it's really important to note the region has been looking at and planning for this growth that we're experiencing and that we're expecting. We've been looking at that for going back 8-9 years. This current set of growth pressures that are developing. And so we addressed most of the road growth recently through the fuel revenue indexing program, but that still left us with a need to address traditional transit improvements, explore high-capacity transit options, address walking and bicycling, as well as acknowledge and work into our future planning all of the new and emerging transportation technologies that are out there and that are developing. And so Onboard starts to address that. We've developed 8 strategies, 8 major strategies, and then a total of 65 projects that achieve those strategies. And to preview that, I'm going to, okay, see if we can get this to, no.
Work, school, care, freedom, fun, life. We all need to connect with the things that move us. And one question faces us all. How will we get where we need to be? Southern Nevada's population has nearly doubled since 2000, and it shows no signs of slowing down. This rapid growth brings many challenges, and how we connect from one part of our region to another is perhaps the greatest challenge of them all. Our rapidly increasing population creates an unsustainable increase in the number of vehicles on our roads, and our current transportation infrastructure cannot keep up. Without changes, Las Vegas's future looks a lot like Los Angeles, which has shown that you can't build your way out of traffic and congestion with more roads. It's time to stop thinking about moving more cars and instead find new and innovative ways to move more people. That's the motivation behind Onboard. Find sustainable transportation solutions that will improve our way of life, our environment, our economy, and keep us connected to everything that moves us. Onboard imagines 8 innovative strategies for growth to help all Southern Nevadans connect more easily, more efficiently, and more safely to everything that moves us. From all of our neighborhoods to the Strip and downtown, to major events and destinations, to our airport and beyond. For trips both long and short, whether you're on wheels, rails, or on foot, we aim to connect our community based on what's most important to you. We need to think bigger, bolder, and differently, just as we always have, in order to better plan for tomorrow. 1. Let's consider more high-capacity transit, including light rail and bus rapid transit, providing faster, more frequent service on high-demand routes. 2. Expanding existing transit to reach more people, homes, and jobs. 3. Increase safety and security through additional lighting, shelters, and safety features like protective bollards and security personnel for all users. 4. Make short trips easier with bike lanes, widen sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, shade, and landscaping. 5. Increase and simplify travel options for older adults, our veterans, and people with disabilities. Doubling service to medical appointments, community centers, grocery shopping, and other important services. 6. Improve connections to major destinations like McCarran Airport, major job centers, and event venues through express bus routes, commuter services, and game day and event shuttles to ease congestion and delays around major events and shift changes. 7. Improve transit services for employees on the Strip and downtown through express shuttles, pedestrian connections, and back-of-house drop-off. And finally, 8. Leverage technology to improve mobility and sustainability, making it easier to plan, book, and pay for trips, including real-time arrival and departure information, and going one step further, using clean fuel technologies and charging networks to both transition to an all-electric transit fleet and support electric vehicles in Southern Nevada. Our majestic mountains and desert, nature and neighborhoods make this area the wondrous community it is. It also means we're running out of space to build more roads like we've always done in the past. If we're truly going to protect our future quality of life, connecting with Onboard is the only way forward. And for this to work, It has to be our collective imagination. With your input, passion, and vision, On Board will turn into our community's plan. So let's write the future together. The time to get on board is now.
Okay, I wasn't sure exactly what would happen at the very end, whether it would go to the next slide immediately. So, okay. I just want to emphasize one thing. That's a draft presentation, a draft video of a draft plan. As the plan evolves a little bit more, the video itself will probably undergo some changes as well. But I just want to quickly now run through the strategies, as most of you had a chance to explore them a little bit before we started with the presentations. And we'll be able to return to those as well afterwards. But I did want to just briefly go through and describe in a little bit more detail than that video provides what these involve. So when we talk about a high-capacity transit system, we're talking really about choosing the appropriate mode for a corridor at the time that we start to develop that particular corridor. And so this is a 20-year plan, so some of these happen over time. But we do want to emphasize for now what those technologies are bus rapid transit and light rail. So just trying to make clear what we're talking about when we talk about these modes. So over the course of 2.5 years and like I said earlier, literally hundreds of meetings, discussions with stakeholders, working with local jurisdictions, and property owners along some of these corridors. We've developed a plan for a total of 19 corridors. They'd be implemented in different phases, but a total of 19 corridors and about 200 miles of high-capacity transit, including light rail, bus rapid transit, and rapid bus, which is a very advanced high-feature form of bus transit. These would be phased in. The proposal is to phase them in over 2 different phases. And as we get through this, we can go through the individual corridors. But the first phases would be this Charleston line, the green line that runs down Charleston, what we call the Cross Valley Connector, which is Boulder Highway to Flamingo, and then up, I think it's Decatur. And then North Fifth as the final of the first 3 corridors that would be further explored. And while we're doing that, I just want to really note that Maryland Parkway is acknowledged in here. We didn't replan Maryland Parkway. The RTC have been working on that for many years, and so we're acknowledging that as part of the system, and that would still continue with its current development. One thing to emphasize with all of the strategies that we're going to go through is these all reflect things that we've heard from people. These are all ones that match what we heard as needs or wants from the community, and they're all supported as well by the best data analysis that we've been able to pull together. So for this one, just want to emphasize really the bottom statistic is the one that I personally have always found most interesting, is that 60% of people in one of our surveys responded saying that high-capacity transit would encourage them to try a new mode of travel. It's really important to note that survey was not just transit riders. That was drivers as well. More than 60% of the people who took that survey said that they drive 5 days a week or more. And so that reflected an interest, we thought, in exploring all the potential modes of transportation. The next one of the strategies is to expand transit service to maximize access to housing and jobs. Please don't try to read the legend. It's there on the wall. It's in the plan document. But the main thing to point out is the blue area on this map is where we currently have what we call high-frequency service. The gray area is where we currently have other bus service, and then the light gray area are the parts of the urbanized region that doesn't yet have some form of transit. So the basic strategies are to increase frequency and quality of service and span of service in some instances in places where we currently have transit, and then find ways to extend transit into the other areas. And it may be regular bus service, or it may be one of the new modes or alternatives that are starting to emerge as transportation technologies continue to innovate. And again, backed up with data, a lot of people wanting improved access, a lot of people preferring transit going to new areas, a lot of people, nearly equal number of people saying that they wanted to improve transit in current areas as well as improving that access to jobs, housing, and medical services. Third strategy is to make all travel options safer and more secure. So this includes, as the video alluded to, it includes things like increased security presence, better lighting around bus stops, bollards, or other safety measures, whatever the best safety measure is for particular bus stop locations, and implementing those. As well as we would work with the local agencies to develop a traffic crash analysis and countermeasure program so that we quickly work to identify hotspot crash areas and find solutions for those. So it's not just a transit plan, it's a mobility plan, and that includes roads as well. Safety was a major issue. This one actually, want to note that this tracks back to a survey where transportation safety was listed as one of the top priorities. 78% of the population said that. That was from a survey that we conducted back in 2016. So we've been looking into this for quite a while. We've known that this is one of those things that attracts everyone or factors into everyone's decisions as to what kind of travel modes they choose. The fourth strategy is to make short trips easier. So that's improving the walkable and bikeable infrastructure throughout the valley, specifically to allow easier access to our transit system, but also to make it easier for someone to choose to walk or bike to the store for a short, quick errand type trip. And so this is one that we think would actually make quite a bit of difference for being able to address future growth by helping people find alternatives to getting in the car and jumping on the crowded road, even for a short trip. So that's very important outcome-wise. And also something that a lot of people valued in our survey. So the survey, we asked them sort of to evaluate whether walking and biking are fine the way they are or should be better. In almost all instances, a 3 to 4 to 1 ratio of people expressing that they should be better than they currently are. And so the plan reflects that. Fifth strategy is expanding services for seniors, veterans, as well as persons with disabilities. So basically what we're calling for with this one is to double the service that we provide for seniors and persons and veterans, and then funding, assuming that funding is available to do this, to expand our paratransit service for people with disabilities to cover the entire urban part of the valley. Again, reflected in surveys. You want to note that we conducted a number of surveys. That 22,000 really comes across as the totals that we received, 22,000 unique responses across 4 different surveys. So this was one that was specifically targeted to seniors and people who use paratransit. The sixth strategy is to improve connections to major destinations, such as McCarran International Airport, and then some of the new venues that have appeared and that are going to be opening up as well. So, also finding ways to get people to and from those new big venues as well, such as Allegiant Stadium, T-Mobile, but also major job destinations, major job centers, employment areas, things like that too. So this includes some strategies like additional express routes that serve those areas, shuttle routes that special event game day type event shuttles to reach the venues, and then improving service in and around McCarran Airport, partnering very closely, of course, with the airport and getting that done. Again, these were important. Some of these numbers, just to point out, when you see like it says 23% or 34%, that's those are instances where we constrain people. So they had to choose like one or two priorities. And so they, when you spread out across, that's actually a fairly high. These are the top responses that came from these. If you have, I think there were 19 choices for locations for better services. 23% said that reaching these major destinations is one of those. So that actually reflects a pretty strong community support for that. Seventh strategy is to provide reliable transit for Strip and downtown Las Vegas employees. This population makes up, there's 20 to 30% of the jobs in the region, depending on exactly how you want to define the resort corridor area. And providing reliable transit options for those workers would make their lives easier, would provide economic benefit to the employers as well. And so this includes some strategies like operating back-of-house shuttles to the major employers on the resort corridor, as well as ensuring that there are express routes that can reach some of the areas where resort corridor employees are concentrated, that can get them from their homes to their jobs that much easier. Pretty big priority across the region, as well as from these populations too. And then the eighth strategy is to leverage technology to improve mobility and sustainability. I'll go through what some of these are, but again, almost 50% of the population who took the survey respondents, said that we need to incorporate new transportation technologies. And then about 50% said that new technologies and using some of these alternatives would encourage them to try something new that they're not currently doing relating to transportation. So these include things that are specific to transit, such as improving fare payment options, sharing better information for route schedule or for trip planning and scheduling. But it also includes things relating to sustainability of the fleet. So it's, the goal is a long-term conversion to electric vehicles for the RTC's transit fleet, the development of a public solar charging network that would make it easier for people to become rundown. There will be a quiz at the end. You've seen it in a video, you've now heard me talk about it, now you get it this way, and everyone, before you can leave, you have to fill out a comment card naming 7 of the 8. I mean, we're not going to make you name all 8, right? I mean, no, okay. Oh, okay, well, all right. It'll be a contest, so we'll see. All right, anyway. So, now that we've put together these draft elements of this plan, these major strategies, as well as the specific projects and these, these basic recommendations, it's really important that we hear from the public about how they react to those, how you guys react to those. What do you like? What changes would you see in this? So what we've developed a fairly quick and easy survey where you can go through, review the strategies online, and then rate them, not rank, but rate them. And we will listen. We're open to making changes to the plan as we need to in order to accommodate those. So, but just, if knowing that your voice is going to be heard is not enough, every 2 weeks, is it every week? Every 2 weeks, yeah, every 2 weeks we're going to be giving away Golden Knights tickets to people who complete the survey. And so there's an incentive there as well. I know how important that is. I want the data, and we'll give away the tickets to make it happen. So, probably we could arrange something. So, this survey is a really key element to what we're doing right now, this January to March timeframe, where we're going out and we're asking the public What do you think about these recommendations? Is there anything that, that you would like to see that's not in there? Are there things that are in there that you don't think would make a difference? We want to know all of this so that we can figure out what the priorities, what the final recommendations from the plan need to be. So we are in this 90-day community engagement period. It includes the online survey. It includes this community meeting today. There'll be another one this afternoon. It includes dozens and dozens of presentations and events across the valley that we're attending during this time period. I think we've probably done a couple dozen already. And so we're really making an effort to go out there, present this, and try to get feedback and comment, because this really needs to be something that the community supports and buys into, and that it reflects what the community needs. So what that leads us to then is the development of a final plan in March at the end of that engagement period. After that, then we'll conduct outreach to the community from April to October or so. And we also, as the plan is done, this is an aspirational plan, we need to start figuring out how do we pay for it. What are those next steps? Right now we're capturing what we need, and then the next step is how do we do it? And all of that is rolled up into the planning process. So that essentially is the plan as it stands right now. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have right now. We'll continue to stand by and try to receive comments and explain in detail any of the elements. But with that concludes the presentation. I'm really happy to answer any questions anyone has. Right here, please. Yeah. It's near the end of March. It's March 31st. Yeah, it's either the 30th or the 31st. We were going exactly 90 days, but yeah. Okay, great. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. So Henderson wants to continue to explore the development of that, and so we keep it on as a future route. There are challenges to develop that route as an effective transit route, but it continues to be something that we would look at and explore. It would be a later phase if it happened, but yeah, it still stays in the map.
Las Vegas is sitting at the epicenter of a future change in transportation over the whole world, and yet it's not mentioned in your plan. And that is the Boring Company is proving that one can do underground, subterranean transport of people and remove them from the street, make it safer for everyone, make easier access for everyone, and yet that isn't included in your plan.
So that's.
And it's ironic because Larry Brown is the head of the LBCDA, which is doing this, and he's also the head of the RTC. And I don't understand why there hasn't been a connection.
So it's a very good question, very good point. So one of the things to note with this plan is it is a living document. It is something that we have committed to revise and update over time. And so as that new technology, and it's a new and frankly it's still unproven technology, as that develops further, then we are able to consider it as ways to provide mobility improvements and alternatives for the region. But at the moment, we can't work it into a plan. We don't know what its capacities are yet, and so on. So it just, as it gets established and tested, then it's a viable alternative, just like any other mobility alternative would be.
Since it's a living plan, doesn't this project deserve at least a mention in what's going on?
Well, yeah, and
So we've had a lot of conversations, and I'll talk about this just because we've had a lot of conversations about the different. We've had a lot of conversations internally about concepts such as high-speed rail, the Boring Company, et cetera. But the challenge is, as you do this plan is flexible and it's very nimble, and that's why we have as strategy number 8, leveraging technologies. There is high-capacity transit routes, but what we don't know is in the next 20 years, what does that look like? Is it going to be autonomous rapid transit, as some communities are calling it? So we're not married to a single technology as much as we're married. Today's plan reflects what's proven. But Boring Company can come in. There's resort corridor mobility assessments. If the Boring Company works out and it's feasible, that could be the mode. So throughout the plan and the locations, what the mode will be, it depends on the time. So those conversations have taken place internally pretty aggressively of how do we best present this plan. Because let's face it, you're asking us to do a 20-year plan in today's environment. 20 years ago when we did the plan, it was very easy to identify bus rapid transit, light rail, what is that going to look like? Today, it's much harder as there's a lot of different technologies coming and our world is getting disrupted. But what we aren't going to do is say, hey, from the resort corridor, we're going to put Boring Company, and then Boring Company doesn't work, and then we get you or other members of the community criticizing us. And so I think with the way we decided to go, and Craig and all of us had many, these were community conversations that took place even with the Transportation Resource Advisory Committee of how do you keep the plan nimble in design. And that is exactly what we are doing. And we've heard that from the chairman, just so you know. So I'm on the record saying we heard that from Chairman Larry Brown, as you referenced him, that the plan needs to be nimble in design as how do we know how to best prepare for what we're going to expect in the next 20 years. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes.
There's a lot of good things that I'd like to see happen. Concerned that the thing that could stand in the way of us being able to go forward is the fact that we're only collecting 3/8% off the dollar in sales tax to fund transit. So are we going to be able to look at our plan and take the steps to take what I believe is a necessary increase in the sales tax so we can be in that 1 to 1.5% range that we see with other agencies around the country?
So, okay. Yeah, so as we put the final touches on the recommendations for what we need as a region for mobility, then the next step is exactly what you're talking about. What are the ways, how do we pay for it? How do we implement it? What is the phasing of all of the other different types of improvements? And so the potential for sales tax or any other viable revenue source, that's when we start exploring those questions. But it's a valid point. Yeah. And okay, he deferred.
Craig, I think it's a great plan and commend you for your work in the RTC and the work. It's been a long time coming, but really a good product, I think. I have a couple of questions on area number 6, which is improved connections to major destinations.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a picture of Allegiant Stadium and a picture of T-Mobile in the airport there. Really 2 questions. The first one, I know that the RTC has some very successful service that you run for Golden Knights games at T-Mobile. Now, I have heard that the financial model for that is that the RTC operates the service, but that essentially the cost to provide that service is provided by the Golden Knights. Is that correct? That they provide, that's some sort of a business arrangement that the RTC has with the Golden Knights, or how does that work?
I'm about to be trumped by, okay.
Jacob, you're exactly right. And going forward with providing service for the Raiders or the Knights, we'll be fully compensated for the cost to provide that. And we will also be somewhat limited by the number of vehicles that we have because the federal government does not allow us to have more than 20% of a spare ratio. So on the nights that we have a Raiders game and a Golden Knights game, we're going to have to be creative in how we provide that. But we will not be providing the service free of charge. we will work with both the Golden Knights as we are right now and the Raiders, and they will pay for the service.
That's great. Thank you very much.
And Jacob, that actually touches, oh, and Jacob, I was just going to add one thing too, because this touches on it, is some of these strategies are net zero cost, or they would actually generate revenue. One of the strategies calls for us to, work with local agencies, local jurisdictions to try to develop public-private partnerships, to develop transit-oriented development along these high-capacity routes. And that would net, in the long run, revenue for the RTC.
Especially with some value capture financing work.
Right. So, I mean, there's a range of those. So some of these, and some of them too, are things that we wouldn't be able to do for years because it would take time for the technology to further develop. Some of them are things that, we would start working on as soon as the plan is done because they're practically no cost, or they lead to another planning study or something like that. So there's a variety of those in there as well, just to point that out. Please go ahead, though.
Very good. Just the second question about the airport was, I know that some of the limitation on adding new service to the airport has been because the airport has limited space that they make available for public transit. Are there any discussions going on, or can you speak to, will the airport have additional ground transportation bays for additional transit service to come to the airport, either Terminal 1, Terminal 3, or possibly another location?
So these are the specific projects that are identified in the plan. Don't rely on those in order to be able to implement them. If through discussions with the airport that were to start to become available, then potentially, yeah, we work those in as well. Another one to note is that the airport and RTC and stakeholders have been discussing for a number of years the idea of a larger multimodal connection center, really, for the airport. And if that were to reach fruition, that would probably dramatically change that as well. There'd probably be like a circulator system within the airport, and then things that go to that access point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any other? Got him back there, and then you.
So I've only been here since '94, and I am still amazed that you guys have been able to expand, knowing that your ridership is not really at the highest peak where you can actually profit on every line. My question is when we start looking at cities that are going through similar growth phases to Las Vegas, well, maybe not quite as much, and they've gone from, the bus lines and actually implemented a light rail system. Mm-hmm. Have they seen, what does the cash flow look like when you take it from a bus to a light rail? I know there's capital improvement costs and everything, but does the operation actually start flowing a little bit better towards the paying for its operation itself with increased ridership on those light rail lines?
Well, the cash flow models for, let's say hypothetically that there were 60 light rail lines across the country. There are probably 60 completely different cash flow models, to be honest. And so, the basic response to that is it's unlikely that, frankly, a light rail line through its operating revenue pays for its operations. But increasingly, as Jacob alluded to, as we talked about with this idea of these public-private partnerships, there are other ways in which value can be captured to try to make them closer to netting positive. But the reality is transit is really provided in a lot of situations as a public good. And so there's a cost associated with that. There are very few transit systems that reach the efficiency that we do for their existing bus operations, and I would, given the way that the RTC approaches that and tries to maintain that really cost effectiveness, that will carry through when we get to the point of developing any of the high capacity lines.
I'm sorry that people perceive or some people perceive my comments as criticisms, but hopefully there are ways of working out this fantastic. I think it's fantastic, the basic premise that you're operating on. You don't want Las Vegas to become another Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a total disaster. People spend 2-3 hours just getting to work. But that's the direction that Las Vegas is headed. The model that we use for development is the sprawl model. Just keep making cheap land available on the outside. The rich people move to those, have large estates. They use lots of resources. They require transportation. They require roads. We just donated, the taxpayers just donated $1 billion to the Hughes Corporation with the fixing of the spaghetti bowl. That's a basic subsidy to one company. We have to change our zoning laws, and it would be very simple to deal with. Right now we have 7 parking spaces for every automobile in southern Nevada. There's no need for that. That's if you count $20,000 per parking space, that's $140,000 in public services or other people's services for each automobile, each $20,000, $30,000 automobile. It's crazy. So why not look at example of large cities like New York, like Shanghai, like Hong Kong, that facilitate the building of residential areas close to the working spaces, so you don't have these long distances to transit. I know and I think your population figures are way off. In the first 30 years that I lived in this city, from 1943 to 1973, the population grew about 100 times during those 30 years. In the last 20 years, it's grown doubled, yet you're projecting growth of only about 25%, 30% for the next 20 years. If Las Vegas is really the #1 destination in the world to play, work, and live, which it really is, it could be, we have to make it possible for people to live in the core area and get to work very easily, have lots of buses going, make it easy to construct housing without requiring the parking in those areas. Use public parking. That's enabled, for example, Beijing to double its population in the last 20 years. Adding subway lines and making it easy to transit. Now 8 million people a day use the subway system. We need to bring the development into the core area, and what we need are law changes.
So I'd say there's absolutely no doubt. We have an answer from the audience, perhaps.
Oh, so since I'm with the city, I mean, I'm not an expert on it because our economic and urban development, we have redevelopment agencies, so downtown, the medical district, and things like that. We just implemented, it was either last year or a year and a half ago, I can't remember, the form-based code, okay? So it makes it easier for mixed-use development. So in Symphony Park, we're having mixed-use development with smaller, condos and apartments that transient people are using, and with that, we've always had in our redevelopment zones downtown, we waive the parking for the downtown areas to an extent where, it's not the large parking lot areas that a lot of other people are, forced to have in other areas. So I would say that the city is working with it, and we've met, and I can get you those maps and things too if you want those, so you can get a better picture of it. But we've met with the RTC. They're really good about working with us on letting us know, the city, on what they are doing, and then we let them know, hey, we're doing this at Symphony Park. We're getting 30-story building here. We're doing this and doing that. So they are up to date on where the medical district and things are going to be expanding, so they can expand their transit out to there. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and the one thing I'll add to that is just there is no doubt that there is a connection between land use and transit, mobility, transportation. There's no doubt whatsoever about that. And we, throughout this plan, the alignments that were chosen for high-capacity routes reflect what the local governments say is their future land use as well. And then as they move forward and as we move forward, as they move forward with their stuff, we move forward with our further development along those corridors, then you know, we'll work with them to ensure that you know, we will be putting high capacity transit in places where it will succeed and where it will make and also make a difference. So it's not just, you know, we're not going to just chase people. If one of the jurisdictions is working towards something, high capacity transit, and all the evidence shows that way. That's what the plan calls for us to try to do, is to support that kind of development as well. So completely understand that point. The RTC, however, does not you know get into the land use decisions and zoning requirements and things like that. But we are standing by and we're working very closely with the jurisdictions to try to ensure the success as we start to develop a system. Okay. Did you have one more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what Chase is saying is exactly what I'm trying to say also. Maybe I'm not saying it
Yeah.
the proper way, but that's the way we should be looking. And I would just like to see the RTC be a motor for this change. It's going to be difficult for these zoning changes. It's going to be difficult because the developers historically have had the most power in governmental institutions. And if we don't change that, we're going to end up like Los Angeles.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why we're trying to develop the plan to come up with the alternatives so that the form of Las Vegas matches what Las Vegas, the region, wants. So yeah, thank you. And you said it clearly, very clearly. Thank you. Yes.
Quick follow-up question on what you mentioned before with the technologies. I think it would probably make me and this gentleman and others feel better if you sort of codified that, because the number 8 just kind of just says technologies. If you say, you know, so am I correct in understanding that as you're preparing to actually implement a new line, that you're gonna, at that time, gonna look at what's current? Okay, see, that's not clear. It wasn't clear till now.
Yeah. So yeah, and that is feedback we've received, and like I've alluded to, these are the recommendations, the draft recommendations, as we're hearing that kind of feedback, and so I appreciate that. We're going to be clarifying some of those types of points and issues.
And that's not a criticism, Ed. We don't think you're criticizing us. We actually welcome that input, and it
Yeah.
just codifies it. To your point, it just codifies what we've been talking about. So, well, input noted.
Okay. I think with that, if there are no other questions, if there are, just grab me, and we're still going to be around if anyone has other questions and they want to explore any of the strategies or any specifics or any broad big picture ideas or anything like that. Feel free. We'll be around a while longer. So again, thanks everybody for coming. And if you have not yet, I demand that you take, no, I strongly encourage you to take the survey and provide some input and any comments that you might have. Thank you.